All right, so today we're going to start off with something that we teased a little bit on the last episode. We gave a little bit of a taster. You may have, if you follow us on Instagram, not to give the shout out too early. You've seen a couple other teasers for this, but we have a very special segment today. We're going to be talking about all things Calgary Flames, talking about what to do with pending UFAs, expectations for the rest of the season, what to do with the trade deadline, all that kind of fun stuff. And to do that, we have brought on the first guest in trick play history, and this is a big deal. So we got a drum roll, give it up for Anand Unnithan, who's coming on to talk Flames with us today. Get the big reveal. Whoosh.
Whoosh. The fancy editing. How's it going, Anand?
There we go.
Yeah, good evening, Simon and Caleb. Excited to be here with you all on Trick Play Podcast. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to do this because I came on your show last week and we had a good time talking about the Flames. I'm excited to continue that conversation here because there's a lot going on with the team right now. There's a lot just overall going on just across the board. A lot of good things, a lot of not so good things. So I'm curious what both of you guys have to say on it. I have a short list that I mentioned to you guys before that we can try and hit on. See where we can get on all that because I'm curious what your guys' opinions on it is going to be. Because I know a lot of the fan base is very divided, especially on a lot of these topics. I think there's definitely two camps to be had a little bit, where a lot of people are picking a side and just not really hearing the other. So I think we're gonna have a lot of differing opinions on this podcast, which I'm excited for.
Probably.
But if we want to start right at probably the most interesting thing and probably the biggest topic I've seen, especially on Twitter lately or X or whatever, is the UFAs, which is Hanifin, Lindholm, Tanev mainly. Those are the big three that everybody's talking about. So I was really curious on what you guys think that they should be doing with them, because I know a lot of people want them to come back. A lot of people really don't. So I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. Anand, I'll let you go first on this one. Do you have a preference on what you want to see coming up from Craig Conroy's office?
All right, so Lindholm, Hanifin, and Chris Tanev. So Lindholm is a forward. He has been chosen as the All-Star candidate pick for this year's Flame season. So it will be interesting to know what he can put through with the All-Star season. The trade deadline is March 8th. So we can wait a little bit on Lindholm right now, especially because we have few other forwards that are waiting to come into the Flames lineup, including Jacob Peltier. So I'm kind of undecided on Elias and Lindholm right now. And between the two, Hanifin and Kristanev, both of them being defenders. Kristanev, he's great at blocking shots. He had an all-time high blocking shots couple games ago. Noah Hanifin put a multi-point game last game. That was against, I believe, Ottawa Senators. He put a multi-point game. So both of them looking great right now. But if I were to really choose and say, I would have one of them traded away, maybe Chris Tanev, if possible, because he's kind of like injury prone. He's already about 30 years old, and Hanifin still has the young in him, and that is Craig Conroy's office statement at the beginning of the season. They said they wanted young people, young guns into the lineup. So I would say keep Hanifin if they can make a good contract deal, and Tanev maybe trade away for a good return. Yeah, that's my thoughts on those three.
Caleb, if you want to take it next, I can wait till the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because I'm thinking in terms of because my general kind of opinion in terms of what the Flames should do, and I kind of think this is a good organizational philosophy to have just broadly, is if you have these guys who are pending UFAs, you want to get something for them as opposed to just letting them walk. So on the side of because yeah, again the big three Lindholm, Tanafin, Lindholm, Tanev, and Hanifin. I think Anand, you make a good point in terms of like Hanifin being, I think, the best core piece to build around for the Flames. If they're gonna keep any one of those three guys, like I agree with what you say, Anand, because he's like he's the one who I could see most, who's most kind of primed to transition into the next era of Flames hockey that I see revolving a lot around youth, because while Hannafin isn't like the super young player by any means, he's no Chris Tanev, and he's still got a lot of good years left in him. So I'm saying, like, I think it has to do because management obviously has a lot more information than we do. Is Hannafin interested in resigning? We don't know. Is that if that's not a road he wants to go now, then if I'm Craig Conroy, you got to trade him. But if he's interested in coming back, that's definitely something I'd entertain. Lindholm and Tanev, on the other hand, I think Lindholm especially, I think you need to get value for him now. I think him getting an all-star selection is a blessing in disguise because as I think, Simon, you guys discussed a little bit on Anand's show, like the validity of him being an all-star. It's for the people who have watched the Flames this season, they know he's probably not the most deserving candidate, but it's almost a blessing in disguise to say Craig Conroy shopping him to other teams saying, look, we've got an all-star forward that we can give to you middle of the season. How many teams can offer that? Give us your first-round picks. Yeah. So if they can get value for him now, then do it. Like, because I don't think you should bring him back. He's been on the decline. There's lots of like stats that have shown that since a lot of his more elite line mates have left, his production has decreased quite a bit. So if you can get any sort of value for him now, do it, because that's because he either walks away in free agency, and this is a terrible decision either way because you don't get anything for him, or you keep him and then need to get rid of him later and you get even less because he isn't playing as well as he used to. So I think the peak time to trade him, was probably a little while back, but get as much value for him as you can now. Tanev, there's probably not as much value there considering his age, like you brought up, Anand. But if it's another thing where it's just like, if you can get value out of these guys before they go to free agency, do it. And unless it's a player like Hannafin where you're seeing as a part of your core for the next like 4 to 5 years, then you don't have any intention of keeping them past like really short term. Get value for them now, get younger. That's something the Flames have been terrible at doing for the last probably the last like decade in terms of getting younger and actually building around young talent. So I'd love to see Craig Conroy start making that step by trading some of these guys for picks and prospects and actually hitting the reset button for once instead of just kind of waffling around in mediocrity.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with you either. I think I have a very similar philosophy when it comes to that stuff. The obvious pick on who to trade, if you had to trade one of the three, if you could only resign two and had to trade one, the obvious pick right there is Tanev. I think that's the main consensus. Trade Tanev, right? But I personally have a hard time doing that. Anand, you made an excellent point on his shot blocking ability, but not only that, but his defense as a whole. I think that he really is one of those players that you can put any defenseman with, and that he's going to make that other guy look really, really good, and that speaks levels to how good of a player I think he is. So I have a really hard time giving up Tanev, personally. I think if you could bring Tanev back on a team-friendly deal, I would love to have him back. How realistic that might be, probably not. It's probably not too good. So I think that you got to probably move him, as crappy as I personally might think it is. If anybody I think is coming back, I think I agree with you, Caleb. It's probably Hannafin. I think I would love to see Hannafin come back because, like you said, he has a lot of his better years, I think, still ahead of him. He's a younger guy. I've been a big fan of him ever since he's come to Calgary. So I'd love to see him come back. Even if you have to pay him, you're getting a good top 4 defenseman for the rest of his career, most likely. I think the one person you have to talk the most about and probably have the most interesting conversation about, and is exactly the reason I'm bringing his stats up on the screen, is Elias Lindholm. In just the fact that he's the one player here who wants the biggest contract and you can probably get the most for, at least in my opinion. Like you mentioned, he's an all-star this year. Throw him out on the market. We have an all-star available, guys. we come take our all-star. But 26 points in 41 games is one of his worst paces he's had since he's become a Flame, or in the NHL as a whole. I know he started peaking once he came here, but I think this might even be worse than his pace when he was on the Hurricanes, I believe. I could probably check that as well. It's just not a very good season for him, which is why I've personally been intrigued to why he was personally picked, at least this season, to be the All-Star for the Flames. It's a bit of an interesting choice, at least in my opinion. But I think you got to trade Lindholm. If anybody, if you have to let Tanev walk, you have to let Tanev walk. But you have to try and get something for Lindholm, because right now is more than you will ever get for any other of these players, at least in my opinion. I'm curious what you guys have to say mostly on the tank that a lot of people want the Flames to go on. It's been a very controversial term, especially in the city. A lot of people believe that ownership do not want a tank at all, if at all possible. I know it's just not something that a lot of people in the building want to do. A lot of people disagree with that, just as a whole. So I'm curious, again, if we want to go around the round table a little bit here that we've kind of got going, on what your guys' opinion on trying to go all in this season, whether you try and bulk up here at the trade deadline, add a couple more pieces, rush for that Pacific wildcard spot, or do you try and sell a little bit, maybe a little bit late for Celebrini, but you can still get a really, really good player potentially here. So I'm curious what you guys have to say on it. I'll let Anand, you can go first on this one.
Yeah. Good question, Simon. It's going to be an interesting season, like we just said right now, for the Flames. But are we going for the tank? Obviously, there are two sides for that. I want to see where we get these few of the trades done and get the young picks and then push into Flames playoff run. Obviously, because this is my first whole season as a Flames fan, I don't want to be disappointed. I want to see the red mile go on. I don't know how long I'll be able to stay as a Flames fan. There are many others in the same boat as well. When can we possibly see a Flames playoff run? And right now, with the younglings they have right now, for example, Konazari, Pospisil, giving them an opportunity to get into the playoff, it will feel so good for them because they put the hard work in so far all this season. It's the young guys that are shining. There is even we are waiting for Jacob Peltier to return. Oliver Shillington might come back to the Flames, so making it remarkable for them. At least that one season, if we can make it remarkable for them, memorable for them. So I say push for the playoff run. If you come out few points short, it's a reality, but make it happen. Make those trade moves. Push the playoff season, and then we'll see what happens next. But going into Team Tank looking for Celebrini or somebody else, it will be a little disappointing. Then we might see maybe Zari or Pospisil not wanting to stay with the Flames if they go down the losing road because they're the one putting all the effort. So that's what I think. Caleb, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the reality of, I mean, it's never tanking in terms of like the players will never tank. I think it's important to realize like tanking is a management decision in terms of not fielding the best possible lineup you can and just and doing stuff like trading away assets like Lindholm and Tanev and Hanifin that make your team better in the short term. But I do think it's important to look at the long term picture here, because I think there's some important things to think about. Is yes, well, obviously going on a massive skid to end the season and improving our draft stock, but ultimately having a really shitty end to the season, that's not going to be fun. For Flames fans, for the players, for nobody. And I think, like you make a really good point in terms of like the young players that we do have wanting to be able to retain them. I think that's probably one of the most important things to be cautious of when you think about potentially trading away a bunch of assets and saying like, this is the lost season, we need to kind of start fresh. However, I think it is important to do that because I think an important mantra to go by is that if you're that 17th in the standings is the worst place to be in. You would much rather be dead last than 17th because you don't have the chance to be in the playoffs and you have the worst pick out of the non-playoff teams. And so you're stuck in mediocrity. It's so much harder to get out of mediocrity than it is to get out of the basement. because if you're in the basement, the league helps you because they give you high draft picks. Like that's how the system's designed to work, right? But if you're continually mediocre, you're a team that on the fringes of the playoffs are kind of like struggling to break out. That you're not going to do anything with that. And I think the Flames are probably the best example in the NHL for that over the last 10 years. And so like it's just as a Flames fan, like looking back at the last few years, like Anand, I know you just started watching the Flames, but I think it kind of speaks to how mediocre they've been the last few years to say that I haven't experienced that many more playoff runs than you have, or at least promising ones, right? Because we've had a couple of years where there's been hope, and then there's been my other. I've been watching like you, Simon. I've been watching the Flames since I was young, so even with that, there hasn't been all that much success just because we've been stuck in that kind of first round, second round exit kind of team or fringe playoff team. And if you actually want to make a run for things, you have to get a higher draft pick and get a couple superstars, get players who could actually make a difference. I'm thinking about even Matthew Tkachuk when there was a year where we didn't do so hot and we got, I think it was pick 6. And look at how much Tkachuk revitalized our franchise, like how much better we were because of Tkachuk. And obviously you're going to get people in like the 5th, 6th round, like you're going to get the late round gems, but that's not something to count on. They don't have the same hit rate as the higher picks do. So I think you have to, like, if you want to actually contend, you want to actually rebuild a team, then you have to start from the ground floor up. And that starts from trading away your valuable assets, keeping young players, but trying to rebuild from the ground up. Because like you look at teams like the Ducks, you look at teams like the Kings, they are on their way up because that's how they start. That's how they build their team, and they have young, promising stars that we're going to see these teams in contention for a long time to come. And for the Flames, that's just not quite the case right now. They have some promising young talent, but it's not quite at that level yet because we haven't fully committed to the bit. We're stuck in the middle because we're just caught in this. We don't know what to do. We don't know if we want to push for anything or kind of slink back. I think it's time to slink back. I think it's been time to slink back for a few years now, ever since Gaudreau and Tkachuk left, and even potentially a little bit before that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is the argument on one side of things, because I think you make a very good point there on the fact that this team has been what you would call mediocre for a very long time now. And a lot of our core, especially in previous years, with a big exception, obviously, to Matthew Tkachuk, has been built through late round picks. I think that was a really, really good point you made there, because if you go through our lineup right now, Rasmus Anderson, like, if you just, like, he's the big one that pops up to me right away. He was a 2nd or 3rd round pick. A lot of our main core that we drafted are either late round, even a lot of our prospects now. I mean, Dustin Wolf was a 7th rounder. Coronado, he was mid 1st round, and then Zari was late 1st round. I think with all of these guys, we're getting lucky because we're getting guys who are very, very good, but I don't think that you can really rely on that. And I'd like to see us bring in some elite prospects. And I think I don't know if I'd necessarily hate it, because I'd like the fact that the Flames would be in on a lot of these young prospects, or a lot of those really, really good prospects. And it'd be cool to see us get one of them, because it feels like it's been a couple of years since we've been in a position where we could get somebody who could really turn around this franchise. And I think the last time I really remember us being in that position was, like you said, Tkachuk. When we had that Tkachuk pick, I remember being excited for it. I was watching that NHL draft going, who are we going to take? Who are we going to take? Because I knew whoever we got, it was like it was adding more hope to this franchise that we haven't necessarily had in a long time, because we just haven't been in we haven't been good enough to necessarily win anything too major, and 2, we just haven't been in that position to even get that pick and potentially jump our franchise all the way up. I'd just like to see us really add to this core with a couple of more elite prospects than we currently have. So I agree with you on that part. But I will say I feel like, at least for this season, we're a little bit late. I think no matter what happens, I think we're kind of in a position now where I think, at least in the standings, I don't think we'll be able to fall down into the top 10, which is where I'd want to be if you're going to tank. I just think that we're I don't know. It feels a little late is kind of where I'm trying to land on that. I'm trying to double task, because I want to bring up the the standings in the division while just so that we have it on the screen, just so we can talk about it as well. But the Flames are currently sitting at 18, 18, and 5, sitting, I believe it's 2 or 3 points out of the wild card. So right now we're closer to the playoffs than we are a top 10 pick.
Yeah, it is also important to note that we have like we're behind the Oilers and they have like 4 or 5 games in hand. So we're really like because the Oilers have been winning all their games, so we're really a lot further back than that. And I think I don't know. I think you're right in that we did start too late because we're in that same spot we always are, where it's like, are we a playoff team or are we a top 10 draft pick team? It's impossible to tell. But it's the kind of thing where I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, you started too late, whatever, but you have to pick a side at some point. And if you just keep it like I can't imagine a world in which they're buying at the trade deadline. Like that seems just utterly absurd to me. Like I don't think you can. I don't think you do that. Or like, do you do that? Do you stick with the same core and just not do anything? Because I think there's lots of downsides to that, like we talked about in the last segment too. Or do
It's
you
almost
trade
a
away?
lose-lose.
And I don't think. Yeah, because that's the situation the Flames have painted themselves in, right? Like, it's kind of the way like when you refuse to kind of make a strong decision for this long, kind of the situation you get yourselves in. It's hockey purgatory, really.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you either. I think that the position we're in right now is not really great. If we want to continue moving through a couple of the questions that I mainly have here, Shillington and Pelliche are two players who are coming back in the near future. I think the timeline on Shillington is looking a lot better than Pelliche, at least to my knowledge currently. But I'm curious what you guys think that they might add to this team and what maybe it would add to potentially a couple of those trades that you were talking about at the trade deadline, Caleb, or maybe you're trying to offload with the Flames because you have a couple more young guys on longer contracts who are able to come in, right? So I'm curious what you guys think they might add to this team. I personally have a lot to say on this one, so I'm excited to see what you guys have. Again, Anand, you can go first on this one.
Yeah, Simon, before I go on to Shillington and Pelche, I want to quickly say I'm watching the game currently live right now behind the on my phone, and Yegor Sharangovich just scored a hat trick. Flames are now up 6-2 right now against the Arizona Coyotes. So little fun note for there. Just want to say, as we were talking about the trades, definitely Craig Conroy has won this trade against Tyler Toffoli. He's Yegor Sharangovich is doing much better than Tyler Toffoli. So just a
Holy
point there.
smokes, is he a good player, huh?
Yeah. Now going back to Oliver Shillington. So Oliver Shillington is a defender. I know he's back into the Calgary Wranglers lineup tonight. He's playing. I already heard that he got a nice PK in and almost a short-handed goal, but he didn't score. But he had an opportunity. So I'm really curious to see. I don't know if we have a timeline on Shillington yet, but hopefully maybe soon. I think it's around 3 games in. He has a couple more games where the AHL can decide do we extend him in the AHL or is he ready to come back to the Flames again. The organization won't rush him. I think he'll add real core to defensive for the Flames team, especially since right now Gilbert is hurt right now. I don't know his timeline of return. So if in the near future, if we need a defenseman, Shillington can provide that. And if we trade, let's say Tanev, probably maybe Shillington can replace Tanev. Good possibility there. And then Pelche wise, he's going to be that great person for probably. I know Huberdeau also got a point tonight, but he can be a great teammate for Huberdeau's line because Huberdeau is a Frenchman as well as Jacob Pelche. So they both can connect well. And Jacob Pelche is just the energy and the enthusiasm he puts in. That's going to be fantastic. So I think both of them can be a great value. Just right now, we don't know if there is a spot for them on the lineup yet. So let them play in the Wranglers, let them get settled, and then we'll see what happens in the near future. Yeah, Caleb, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for both players, like it's just great to have them back. I think Shillington especially is so I haven't gotten the chance to see Peltier as much because I know he played a little bit last season, but it was a little bit more limited. But Shillington is someone I'm really excited for, and just for him to know that, because I know the reason he's been away for so long was just struggles with mental health. So it's really great to see him um, be doing better and be able to um, be healthy enough to return to the team, which is just like really awesome to see because he was fantastic when he was in the lineup. He just kind of provided so much of an extra spark where it's just this extra little bit of energy, and I feel like there's like it's like a spark plug almost in your lineup, where I feel like I saw that the biggest spark plug guy in the Flames that I've seen was Kachuk. Because he just provided, like, he energized that entire team, and there were so many games where you feel like he is putting 100% more effort in than the next guy, and I feel like there's Shillington maybe not as consistently, but there was just times when I would watch this Flames team with Shillington on it, where it's just, especially in the offensive zone, because he's an odd offensive guy, coming from up from the D spot. Like there's one I don't know if I'm gonna have the details exactly right, but there's this Dallas game where it was like a back and forth game, and I think it was like 4-4 something in the end, and I don't know if it was overtime or the end of the third, but Shillington just orchestrated this brilliant pass play with some other random guy, and it was just like incredible to see him just jump up into the play, have these great offensive instincts, and just completely flip the fortunes of his team in one game. That kind of spark is something the Flames need, and especially coming from a younger guy like Shillington. Like, it's again the conversation we were having. It's just whenever your team gets younger, that's always a good thing, because you don't want to end up like Pittsburgh, and I've talked enough about them on the pod before, where you're just kind of, you think we're stuck in purgatory, they're going to be pretty stuck in purgatory too, with all of the like 35-year-olds they've signed. So like adding guys like Shillington to a young core is fantastic, and obviously Peltier more of the same thing. Because whenever you get to see your young prospects in action, and I know Peltier has showed like an immense amount of promise in I know he, like, in preseason and any other times he's been called up to the lineup. Especially when it was so frustrating that Daryl Sutter just wouldn't call him up. It's going to be great to see him in action again and be able to see what he can really do. And like you said, Anand, hopefully ignite some of the kind of dormant talent like Huberdeau. It's just all of these players can bring a potential extra energy boost, a potential extra something. Because I think if you're a Flames fan, this team, it just kind of seems like it's dead and treading water a little bit. Because I think the record right now is what, like a perfect 18-5 or whatever. Like we're literally squatting at the 500 line. If Shillington and Peltier coming back can provide a little bit of spark to that lineup, like then it'll be all the more worth it.
Nope, and I agree with you, both of you guys as well. I really agree with what you said there on Shillington, Caleb, because I've been a big fan of him for a long time since he's been in Calgary, for a lot of the same reasons that you said. He is one of those guys. He's almost like a fourth forward out there. He's one of those defensemen. He's so quick. He's got a really, really nice shot. He's just one of those players who the whole time he's been here, you've just been waiting for him. He's a star in the making. You can really, really tell when he's playing. And I personally am so excited to see him back in the lineup, because I think one issue, especially on the power play, it's been better lately, but still shaky at times. I think he's somebody who can really add to that power play specifically, and I'm personally so excited to see him in that spot. As for Pelliche, I think he's one of those young guys who you can almost, the second he's healthy, he's got to come back up. He was so good last year when we gave him the opportunity to play. He was really, really, I liked what I saw from him in the preseason as well. He's so insanely talented that it's so just nuts to me how little NHL time he's gotten. So I'm really excited to see him get a little bit more time up here. Same with Shillington, though. The whole time, every single time that we've gotten to see him up here, I feel like he's shown up. He's what he lacks in defensive ability, I feel like he makes up for on the offensive attack there. And I think Anand, you mentioned the idea of potentially him coming up to fill in for Tanev. At least for me, I don't know how much I personally like the idea of that, just because I feel like they're polar opposite styles. And I love Tanev. I love the fact that he's here, so that hurts my soul a little bit. But I think you might be right. Just overall on if we see a Tanev or even potentially a Hanifin trade in the next month or two, or I guess just 1 month, whatever. Like if we end up seeing that happen, I think Shillington is going to be the guy who comes up, and I think if he is still the player that we got to see 1 or 2 years ago, I'm so excited to see it. I think he's just a stellar player, and I personally am so excited to see it. This I think pretty well moves right into I think what we can probably call the last question. We'll hit on this one and then we'll probably end the podcast or end the segment at that. What are you guys' expectations for the end of this season for the Flames? I like Caleb mentioned 18, 18 and 5. I think you were dead on with that standings, or at least what their record is. What are your guys' expectations? We've talked about what we personally think the Flames should do. What do you guys think the Flames will do for the end of this season? And if you even want to get into the future, go right ahead. Anand, I'll throw the ball over to you.
All right, Simon, thank you. Yeah, so right now, if we are gonna call this game, which is happening right now, Flames are Arizona Coyotes 6-2, so we can almost call it a game if the Coyotes don't fight back. So that brings Flames 19, 18, and 5 this season. They're already 42 games done this season, so that's almost halfway, around 41 more games. If I do my math correctly, 40 games, 41, 42 games left in the season. So, it could go any different way possibly. And Flames could really push together, push for a playoff win. This game will get them into 43 points. Then we hope either Edmonton Oilers or Nashville Predators drop the ball in the next couple of games, then we can catch up to them and be a playoff team. Or my wish, as we said, maybe if we are not looking to be that playoff team, we can focus on the trade and the moves, especially for Lindholm. Like Caleb said at the beginning, Lindholm being what do you call all-star disguise, we could get him moved away and a few other options. And then if that's the way Conroy decides to go, then it might be. I would say we wait until the All-Star break to see what direction the Flames are and where they at. And then I'll chime in then. But I'm hoping for a playoff entry for sure. A playoff team get the red mile going. But again, it's gonna see how they can remain consistent. A few of the players to watch, obviously, Igor Sharangovich, he's been fantastic with the trade. Jonathan Huberdeau now has almost point per game now, so he's a key player to watch. And that line of Zari Kadri and Pospisil. So, yeah, those are my final thoughts. Over to you, Caleb.
Yeah, I think in terms of expectations, I think the reality of it is as bad as this might be, this team is not a playoff team, and they haven't consistently shown that. If you are a playoff team, you cannot have performances like they had against teams like Chicago with most of their lineup injured, including Connor Bedard dropping the ball like that. You can't have that happen, especially when teams like you mentioned, Anand, like the Oilers, who have just won 9 straight. We are just not. It's about. I think it's just like a lot of this conversation, like broadly, has kind of been about what can you do to potentially get out of this spot, because it's like this is not the spot you want to be in when you're a Flames fan. You don't want to be on the fringe of the playoffs. You want to obviously be leading the division, leading the charge, actually having a chance to push for something in the playoffs. And this spot is not where you want to be. And I think it's just about acceptance of where you are and just saying, hey, we're not there yet. And that's okay, because we need to build that over the next few years. And Flames management, and especially Flames ownership, has been so hesitant to say that and so in denial in terms of what this team actually is and what the future actually looks like. And so I think in terms of my expectations are a funny thing, because who knows what the future is going to look like. But if I could set like a goal for this Flames roster, all I want to see, I don't really want. I mean, I would love to see them make the playoffs, as I always would, because the playoffs are the best kind of hockey of all time, and I'd love to watch my favorite team in the playoffs. But I don't think that's going to help us in the long term. And I think if I want to see anything out of the Flames, it's kind of just like I kind of compare it to the very end of last season, like that last game, which I know you've talked about a lot, Simon, in terms of that last game. We were out of it. We weren't going to make the playoffs, but you watched it for Dustin Wolf to see the future of this team. And I almost kind of want to take that little like moment and just expand that. If I have a hope for this team, it's that moment but expanded for the next 40 games for all of the young players, like you mentioned, Anand, like Zari, Pospisil. You want to see that development continue, because for a team like the Flames, that's what's most important, is taking these young players and developing them and turning them into players that eventually can lead you into the promised land and lead you into a team that's winning the division. Because I think if you continue to push for the playoffs and just work under this delusion that we actually have a shot at anything, is kind of foolish, because our star players just aren't stars anymore. The Huberto trade, I think we can all safely say in hindsight, was a complete failure. And so as a team, we need to work our way out under that and just kind of cross our fingers and hope and pray until he's gone from the team, or hopefully for his sake, hopefully he rebounds, but it's not how it's looking. Hopefully we can ride that out and kind of rebuild with the youth. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping for, is just seeing that kind of youth movement in terms of the young players that we have high hopes for improving, getting better, and kind of coming into their own more and more for the rest of the season. I think playoffs isn't a realistic expectation, and I think that's okay with where they are. And I think the sooner that Flames management accepts that too, I think the better future this team's going to have.
Yep, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'd really like to see this team make the playoffs, but I think I'll go back to something you said earlier, Caleb, or at least you pointed out when we had the standings in front of us. The Oilers still have about 3 more games left, more than we do, and we're still 3 points behind them. And I think that pretty much describes our chances at the playoffs pretty well. I think if we fight for it and really and don't trade away anybody at the deadline and go, listen, we are going all in for this wild card spot, I think that there's a very good chance we're going to land right at 17. I think that 17-18 spot, I think that we're going to end up right back there, which is, again, something you pointed out, Caleb. I think, truthfully, knowing the tendencies of this Flames team, I have a funny feeling that's right where we're going to be. But I agree with you. I'd love to see all of these young guys come up, especially I'd like to see Coronado back up at the top level. He was so good for the short time he was here. I'd love to see him back up. And Dustin Wolf, he's another guy you pointed out. I love talking about that last game of the season, or last year, because I think that we saw so much promise out of him. And I'd love to see an opportunity where maybe we trade Vladar. If we somehow can get a really good offer for Markstrom, I'd be interested in maybe a Markstrom trade. I think that'd be such a unique situation there, where we have a chance here to bring up a guy who is NHL ready and really give him a chance, and maybe some games that don't necessarily mean a lot, as it's not necessarily you're trying to win them, but it's giving him the chance to just, get his feet wet a little bit more at the NHL level. And we've seen the Flames do that in the past with different goalies. In my brain, this is a really long pull, but Ordio, if you can remember back when he was a Flames prospect goalie, when the Flames were having a bad season, I can't remember which one. It would have been 2016, 2017-ish area. But in about February or March, we called him up, and he actually ended up starting for the last bit of the season and doing a pretty good job at that. I was pretty impressed by him, and I thought that he'd have a good potential spot. We've seen stuff like Riddick was another guy who came up in a similar position and managed to take advantage of it. I'd love to see Dustin Wolf have a similar role in the second half of the season if things start to go downhill. I don't know. I'm a pessimist when it comes to this. We don't know what Craig Conroy's trade deadline philosophy is going to end up looking like. Obviously, it's his first deadline as a general manager, so there's a lot of things coming up. We're still a month away from it as well, so plenty of time for him to make a couple of moves here. So at the end of the day, Caleb, like you said, we're all just going over. It doesn't mean much what our expectations are because expectations are just expectations. We don't know what's going to happen. But I would really like to say, similar to what you said, I'd like to see a lot of these young guys come up if things aren't going well. I'd love to see us somehow slip into the top 10. As slim as that is, there'd be a lot of luck involved in that one if we can get in the top 10 of the draft. But I'd love to see us get potentially an elite prospect who might be able to help us out. And I'd love to just overall, we've seen a lot of it this year, but I want to see this team continue to get younger. I think that's the biggest thing for me, and that'll just continue to be it. And I know that's going to mean trading away a lot of players on this team that I really like. Tanev, again, a player that I think is so good for this team, and I think that he's going to be so good for whatever contender we end up trading him to. So, yeah, I think that's it for me. I think that we can probably end this one right off. Anand, thanks for joining us. I think we had a terrific time here. It was a really, really, really fun being able to talk Flames with you. And yeah, I don't know how much more I have to add. I'm running out of words. But thanks everybody for watching this segment. We've got NFL coming up next.